Hello, my name is Chris Runeckles. I'm the Assistant Director of Durrington Research School. In this short video, I'm going to be talking you through our Memory and Metacognition 3-day training program. So the program is led by myself and also James Crane, one of our Research School associates. It's, as I say, over 3 days, which are spread through January, March and June next year, 2021. And this particular course is aimed at curriculum leaders and senior leaders with a responsibility for leading teaching and learning. This course is really for affecting change at a department level or a whole school level, so it would be less useful for classroom teachers. So a bit before we get into the details of this particular training program, just a bit on research schools, what we are and what we do. So our purpose within the system is to make sure that the best research evidence reaches classroom teachers so that the most effective implementations can be used across the system. And obviously the moral purpose of that is to improve outcomes for our young people. So that is where we sit within the system. We're not the people doing the research, that's left to academics. We are the people mobilising that research. And obviously those people who choose to engage with our 3-day training programs are very much integral to that process. So in terms of the nature of our training, particularly our 3-day training programs, they follow quite a set structure and process in order to ensure that research evidence is effectively mobilised. So we'll start by identifying a focus. So everyone's going to come to these training programs with their own preconceptions about what memory relates to, what metacognition is, and there'll be different points of learning where some people will be pretty literate in those areas and other people will have not really looked at them much at all. And both of those positions is absolutely fine. So one of the things we need to do straight away is to work out what is this training course for, how's it going to be most useful, and how can I take that back to my setting. So the first part is identifying a focus. Once we've done that, we then start to explore the evidence around it. And a lot of the first day and a large proportion of the second day is doing that. Is actually really looking at the evidence in detail together to find out what it says. Because in order to take these implementations that you're going to create back to your school or your setting, you need to really understand the research evidence at a deep level. So we spend quite a lot of time in that explore phase. Now, what that might do is it might challenge some of your preconceptions about memory and metacognition. So we'll be working to kind of align ourselves so we're all got the same sort of understanding in these different areas. That's not to say everyone's got to do the same thing and think in the same way, but on some of the core principles, we do need to have a shared understanding. So a lot of that section is about that. The next part, mobilising, is about how can we get this into the classrooms we're responsible for. Once that starts to happen, then a lot of it is about teacher practice. So how we can make sure that our teachers are practicing these new interventions so it becomes part of their habitual everyday teaching. We know habits are very hard to break, so a lot of it is about that and how we can make that happen. And then we have a lot of the final part is about how we're reviewing and evaluating the implementations that we're implementing or planning to implement. And then finally, we work together to really try and extend the reach of what we're doing as far as possible in that share and persuade phase. So that's kind of the process, the structure of our training. So this particular training program, this Memory and Metacognition training program. So the first thing to say is actually this originally was 2 training programs, Memory and Metacognition were separate. What we found, having done that, is there's so much crossover, connection between the 2 principles that it just made sense to do them together. And I think by doing them together, what you get is a really rich exposure to those 2 ideas and leaves you with really strong interventions you can take back that take perhaps elements of both of these. So first of all, we explore the research evidence from cognitive science related to memory. So this is really about how memory works, how your long-term memory works, how your working memory works, and how teachers can exploit the lessons from that to really help them help their students retain knowledge for the long term so that it's accessible and usable throughout their time with us and beyond. And this is really transformational knowledge. Once you know this stuff about memory, you'll find you'll never approach teaching the same again. And once you really understand it, there's some really quick wins in terms of how you can help your teachers to reframe their practice, but also some really long-term structural change that can be put in place to help your curriculums. Alongside that, we'll explore the research evidence related to metacognition and self-regulation. So this is much more about how can we create self-regulating learners. Okay, so pupils that can actually take ownership of their learning, that can plan, that can monitor, that can evaluate their learning effectively. And a lot of that is about how we explicitly teach those traits as teachers, but also how we can build them in our students. So I'm going to be doing a lot of exploring of metacognition and self-regulation, using the EEF guidance report on metacognition, but also a variety of other elements of research evidence as well. Once we've achieved that shared understanding, then we start to interpret that evidence and contextualize it and think, okay, which aspects are going to be most useful for me right now? What do I need and what am I going to be able to implement? And I think, that is up to each individual. And we're going to give you lots and lots and lots of different ideas through this training program. And then it's about you sort of working out with our help which ones you want to take forward. And then the final part is then creating really detailed implementation plans, which you can then use to implement your accepted area of focus. So how is this going to be beneficial post-COVID-19 recovery? Well, as we know, all of our pupils, and particularly our disadvantaged, are going to be coming back to us with a lot of gaps in their learning. And we're going to have to be adaptable, we're going to have to be innovative with our curriculum, with our teaching, with our assessment structures, in order to mitigate the effects of those learning gaps and start to rebuild student knowledge and understanding. Now, memory and metacognition can be absolutely our best friends when we're trying to do that. So memory can support, the cognitive science lessons around memory can support our leaders and our teachers to ensure that learning is both retained for the long term and remains accessible to students. So that's going to be vital in this post-COVID world. And alongside that and complementing it are the principles of metacognition. If we can make our students more self-regulating, then they can start to use the principles that we're teaching them around memory in order to really start to drive their own learning and take ownership of it, as I say. So with these two principles are just vital in making sure that the time we do have with our students is the most effective it can be, and that we're starting to rebuild some of the lost learning that has happened in recent months. So structure of the training program, it looks like this. So basically on the first day, what we're trying to get to is that shared understanding around memory and metacognition. And that's all about exploring the evidence and aligning our thinking. Day 2 is a much more practical day. So day 2 is about applying those principles that we've gained a shared understanding of to curriculum, teaching and assessment within our settings. So we structure the day in that way, looking at memory and curriculum, metacognition and curriculum, then memory and teaching and metacognition and teaching, then memory and assessment and metacognition and assessment. And then starting to draw that all together. And then final day is really deepening our understanding, making sure that we go back over those principles that we've done through the other 2 sessions and really ensure that we've got those fully understood. And then lastly, constructing very detailed implementation plans that you can then take away, that we can then help you implement as time passes on. So in between those days, you're going to be doing lots of what we call gap activities. So this is to ensure that these training programs don't become the kind of one-off inset style training that is lost over time, that we keep this stuff as an ongoing process, not as a one-off event. So the sorts of gap activities you'll be doing are audits in your school of where you currently are, lots more reading of research evidence, planning small-scale interventions and trialing things before you settle on your overall plan, evaluating impact, and eventually getting to that full implementation plan writing. The implementation plan writing is actually coming from the EEF guidance report on implementation, which this is a section of, and it talks you through the 6 elements of implementation, which are, first of all, 1 and 2, building foundations, go through the explore phase, the prepare phase, and then the deliver and the sustain phase. So we're going to take you all the way through to the end of stage 4 and the beginnings of stage 5 through the 3-day training program. And then from there, you're going to be taking it on into the end of stage 5 and into stage 6 of the sustaining stage afterwards. But we will remain in place to help you build that sustainability through our coaching offer as well. So how can you book onto Memory and Metacognition? Go onto our website and click on the training drop-down menu. You'll find all of the details there. And that's our school address and our email address if you've got any follow-up questions. Hope to see you in 2021. Good luck with everything. Thank you for listening.